In 1978, a working-class mother named Lois Gibbs uncovered one of the most devastating environmental disasters in U.S. history. Her neighborhood, Love Canal, was built atop 22,000 tons of toxic waste, silently poisoning families with chemicals dumped decades earlier by Hooker Chemical Corporation. Leaks from this buried waste led to widespread contamination, causing severe health issues amongst residents, including birth defects, cancers, and other chronic illnesses. Despite initial governmental inaction, Gibbs mobilized affected families and spearheaded a grassroots movement that pressured federal authorities to intervene, ultimately leading to the creation of the Superfund Act. The legislation aimed to facilitate the cleanup of hazardous waste sites and hold responsible parties accountable for environmental damage. The origins of the Love Canal disaster trace back to the 1940s and 50s, when Hooker Chemical Corporation disposed of toxic industrial waste in an unfinished canal bed in Niagara Falls, New York. Over time, the site was covered and later developed into a residential neighborhood, complete with homes and schools, without any warning to the families who would move in. By the late 1970s, residents began noticing foul odors, black sludge seeping into their basements, and an unusual prevalence of illnesses. Miscarriages, birth defects, epilepsy, and leukemia rates surged. As Gibbs and other residents pushed for answers, they discovered the horrifying reality. Over 80 chemicals, including carcinogens like benzene and dioxin, were leaching into the soil, air, and water supply. Despite evidence of severe health risks, government agencies hesitated to act. It wasn't until relentless protests, media engagement, and testimony before the Congress that President Jimmy Carter declared a federal emergency. This led to the evacuation and relocation of Love Canal residents in two phases, 1978 and 1980, and the eventual establishment of the Superfund program. The Superfund program, formerly known as the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, was created in 1980 to clean up hazardous waste sites and hold polluters accountable. Initially, it was financed through a tax on the petroleum and chemical industries, ensuring that those responsible for environmental damage paid for remediation. However, this funding structure was dismantled in 1995 when Congress allowed the tax to expire. With no industry tax in place, the financial burden shifted to the taxpayers, significantly limiting the program's capacity to clean up the nation's most toxic sites. As a result, hundreds of contaminated areas remain in limbo, and many communities continue to live in proximity to dangerous pollution with little to no remediation. The $400 million Superfund cleanup of Love Canal included a barrier drain system, demolition of contaminated homes, and long-term groundwater supervision. Despite these efforts, scientific uncertainties remained, and activist Lois Gibbs condemned the EPA's decision to declare parts of the area safe for redevelopment in the 1990s. Under the new name Black Creek Village, over 260 homes were sold, but lawsuits from residents in 2012 cited ongoing contamination and birth defects, reigniting concerns about long-term effectiveness of Superfund cleanups.
My family has been affected by the contaminants in our home emotionally, physically, and mentally.
Keith Booz spoke with News 4 in 2013. He and other families can't talk to us now. Their lawyer has ordered them to stay quiet.
The government told us it was safe to come back.
Under the Trump administration, environmental regulations were significantly rolled back. The Environmental Protection Agency, which enforces Superfund cleanups, suffered budget cuts and leadership that prioritized deregulation over environmental justice. Trump's EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, downplayed climate science and weakened environmental protections, resulting in delays and setbacks for many Superfund sites. The administration also rescinded Executive Order 13690, which would have required federal infrastructure, including Superfund sites, to account for future flood risks. This is particularly concerning as approximately 2,000 Superfund sites are located within 25 miles of the East and Gulf coasts, making them vulnerable to rising sea levels and extreme weather events. Past disasters, such as Hurricane Harvey in 2017 and Hurricane Irene in 2011, demonstrated how flooding can release hazardous chemicals from these sites, disproportionately affecting low-income and communities of color. Looking ahead, a second Trump administration could further delay environmental enforcement actions. Changes in leadership at the EPA and DOJ may slow case resolutions, allowing for industries to push for weaker regulations and reduced accountability. Environmental justice initiatives could face funding cuts, and a shift towards compliance assistance over punitive action may lead polluters with fewer consequences. Additionally, rollbacks on climate-related regulations could undermine Superfund site resilience, putting more communities at risk. The Make Polluters Pay principle asserts that those responsible for pollution should bear the financial and legal responsibility for cleanup efforts, rather than burdening taxpayers or affected communities. This principle was foundational to the original Superfund program, but its erosion over the years has resulted in stalled cleanups and lingering environmental hazards. Environmental activists and policymakers continue to fight for the reinstatement of industry taxes to fund Superfund efforts. Research indicates that race is the strongest predictor of where hazardous waste sites are located, and communities of color experience longer wait times for cleanup. By 2040, nearly 1,000 Superfund sites could be at risk of extreme flooding due to climate change, further increasing health risks for vulnerable populations. Policy recommendations include reinstating science-based policies requiring climate adaptation for Superfund sites, increasing EPA oversight and funding for environmental justice programs, and ensuring local communities, especially marginalized groups, are included in Superfund policy decisions. The story of Lois Gibbs and Love Canal is not just a historical event, it's an ongoing lesson in environmental accountability. As climate change and industrial pollution continue to threaten communities worldwide, the fight to hold polluters accountable remains as urgent as ever. The legacy of Love Canal reminds us that grassroots activism can lead to monumental change, but the fight for environmental justice isn't over. If we want to protect our communities from toxic waste and corporate negligence, we must demand that polluters pay for the damage they cause.